Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the 16th edition of the Dasra Philanthropy Week. My name is Reshwin Washington, and though the name is international, the heart is very much national. Fir bhi dil hai Hindustani. It's an honor for me to be moderating today's conversation on scaling impact through peer-to-peer networks in South and Southeast Asia. Um, as we begin, a little context on DPW. For a decade and a half, DPW has been shaping conversations, sparking collaborations, and driving real impact across India's development landscape. And today, we kick off another incredible week, one that challenges us to think bigger, act older, and reimagine India's future together. Um, as we move closer to India's centenary year of independence, 2047, Vikshit Bharat, DPW is a platform for us to collectively envision a future rooted in equity, resilience, and opportunity for all. This year, under the theme Rising at 2047, we're bringing together visionary leaders, philanthropists, and change makers to explore bold, collaborative solutions to systemic challenges and drive inclusive growth. This year, DPW is bigger than ever. We're hosting 40 plus convenings, both virtual and in person, 120 plus thought leaders, 1,000 plus stakeholders, and 20 plus partners, while also expanding to Bangalore for the first time. With the lens of India for the world for India, our discussions will deep dive into equity, collaboration, inclusion, innovation, measurement, and sustainability. Before we start, the house rules are on the chat, but there's one more house rule that I would like to add to that, which is last but not the least. This session is going to be exhaustive, but definitely not exhausting. There will be no PPTs in this session, no technical presentations. It's going to be pure conversation over the next 45 minutes. So let's get started. As we move closer to India's centenary year of independence, Vikshit Bharat 2047 is not just a vision, it's a call for collective action. What will it take to build a future rooted in equity, resilience, and opportunity for all? This is where peer to peer networks play a transformative role. But what are peer to peer networks? Peer networks is where the serious business of change meets the joyful energy of collaboration. It's like a potluck dinner. Everyone brings a unique dish, and together we create a feast. It's a decentralized system where each participant or peer shares resources and communicates directly with others, eliminating the need for central authority. At the core of our discussion today is a simple yet powerful idea. Sustained change doesn't happen in isolation, it happens through collaboration, collective learning, and shared action. In South and Southeast Asia, peer networks catalyze tailored, impactful solutions through direct collaboration across diverse socioeconomic landscapes. Note fosters continuous learning and dissemination of best practices through various mediums, be it knowledge platforms, learning labs and workshops, exposure visits, and convenings. We've seen across the region from time to time that systems challenges cannot be solved in silos. Whether we look at sanitation or climate resilience, gender equity, financial inclusion, or public health, the most enduring solutions have emerged when governments, practitioners, and communities come together to build knowledge ecosystems with iterative feedback loops where learnings are continuously documented and disseminated and refined through strengthening capacities, ensuring that solutions are not just well designed, but are also effectively implemented on the ground, and through shaping policy and practice by amplifying voices, aligning priorities, and making sure that decision making is influenced at scale. Through the session today, you will see that across various sectors, how peer networks act as force multipliers, bridging gaps, strengthening capacities, and driving sustained impact at scale. This panel is an opportunity for all of us to reimagine how we leverage peer-to-peer networks as a catalyst for India at 24/7. Today, we'll explore three main things. how networks enable systemic change, not just knowledge exchange, what it takes to move from collaboration to real world implementation, and lastly, how we ensure that these networks remain dynamic, inclusive, and future ready. Today, we are joined by an incredible panel of leaders who have been at the forefront of building and sustaining such networks across different sectors. We have with us today Dr. Mehreen Matto, team lead from the National Institute of Urban Affairs, Mr. Alauddin Ahmed, project manager, International Training Network Center at Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology, ITN-BUET, Mr. Shamin Asan Chowdhury, project manager from MUNAS, Municipalities Network Policy Advocacy in South Asia, from the UCLG, United Cities and Local Governments, and Anushka Saraf, team lead from DASRA. Like I said, this is going to be an exhaustive and not an exhausting session. It's going to be conversation focused. It's going to be very directed. And start off, let's start off with a question to Mehreen. Before my question to Mehreen, a brief introduction about Mehreen. Dr. Mehreen Matto, as team lead at NIUA, plays a pivotal role in fostering peer-to-peer networks and enabling cross-learning, typically in urban sanitation sector. With over 15 years of experience, she has been instrumental in creating spaces for knowledge exchange among city officials, practitioners, elected representatives, ensuring that best practices are widely disseminated and adapted to diverse urban contexts. She has spearheaded many advocacy and capacity building programs that emphasize peer management and peer engagement. And under her leadership, knowledge sharing mechanisms are enabling ULBs and various other stakeholders to exchange experiences, drive advocacy, and co-develop strategies to accelerate progress towards inclusive and resilient systems. Dr. Mehreen, let's start with the foundation of peer networks, bringing diverse actors or stakeholders together. Now, while collaboration is essential, aligning different stakeholders, governments, funders, practitioners, communities towards a shared vision isn't easy. It's a challenge. So, keeping in mind the diversity of various stakeholders within peer networks, be it within peer groups or the larger network, if you could share with us today, what has your experience been for enabling stakeholders to come together to advocate towards a common narrative or a cause?
First of all, thank you so much to the organizers, the ASRA, for inviting me to such a great learning event and to be part of this panel who the resource persons over here are champions who have done great work. Be it Alauddin sir from ITN-BUET, Shamim sir from UCLG, and the young, dynamic Anushka from DASRA. Happy to be part of this panel. So coming towards the whole notion of this peer-to-peer learning, as you rightly mentioned that India, so I represent National Institute of Urban Affairs, which is an apex autonomous body of Ministry of Housing and Urban Affairs, Government of India, which is working towards urban reforms in India. And as Rashwin rightly mentioned, that India is moving towards the Viksit Bharat 2047, India for the world and world for India. When we talk about making a systemic change, we also need to understand there is a requirement of major disruption, and disruption in a positive sense towards equity, towards inclusion, and towards the whole notion of climate change needs to be the involvement of multiple stakeholders. We majorly focus on the urban local bodies, but who else are the main important stakeholders? It's the elected representatives whose voices, whose decisions are pivotal in shaping cities, towns, states, and the nation as a whole. And I'm a strong advocate, and I'm also a part of this whole network of National Fecal Sludge Septage Management Alliance, NFSSM Alliance, which is which is a platform of more than 34 organizations. And at NIUA, we run this forum called Parvat Manthan. Parvat Manthan, it's more dwelling towards the need, the priorities, of hill states across the Indian Himalayan range. And when we have these platforms, it's bringing the voices of the marginalized, of the grassroots NGOs, of the people whose voices are not heard to the larger foray at state, at national level. And this is how which we have been promoting through the NFSSM Alliance and now through the Parvat Manthan. We can't work in silos. We need to bring the collaborative voices of different stakeholders, different organizations to make that human-centric approach, to make that systemic change across. And I have closely worked with many of the organizations in South Asia, and I believe that the whole notion and the rich experience which organizations and stakeholder across this region bring is magnificent. These platforms are enablers in terms of bringing the best to the foray, to make that policy level intervention, be it through the NFSS Alliance, which made the first policy at national level on septage management, or how the Parvat Manthan, which is bringing the whole three countries across the Indian Himalayan range, India, Nepal, Bhutan, to make that policy level intervention when we talk about uh, equity, sustainability, with regard to water and sanitation in hills. We are cognizant of the fact that we can't have one size fit for all, and how we have to make that intervention that is what works where, and where all the different stakeholders, even the academia, because we are well aware of the fact that data is integral to make a systemic change. And for that, we need to have the on ground research much more strong. And that is how we bring all these different stakeholders. But when I talk about these platforms, it's also the agility of such great organizations, stakeholders, and the trust which these platforms bring to make that big intervention or make that change. Um, and we are just hoping to do and to inch towards making that, be it through policy level intervention, be it through research, be it through capacity building, because capacity building is the core. It's not only about training, it's about peer-to-peer learning, it's about codifying knowledge, it's bringing the best from the cities, from the ground. uh, at an IUA, being a part of the National Fecal Sludge Management Alliance, we have curated content which is being translated into different languages, Bengali, Nepali, so that we can have a repository of knowledge which can be further disseminated to various organizations, because the problem is the same, but yes, the solution will may be different, but not to reinvent the wheel. And platform like these help us to bring the skill set of different organization in a platter. So I stop over here, Rishwin, and happy to give more inputs later, but I will stop over here right now.
Thank you so much, Marian, for sharing. I mean, through your rich experience, we've seen that how alignment and unified advocacy set that stage. But the next step to this is, having the necessary capacity to act on these collective insights. So with advocacy, there is a need to ensure that stakeholders across the sectors, government, practitioners, etc., are being capacitated to understand what the challenges are and therefore to take effective action both at policy as well as implementation levels. Thank you, Mary. We will come back to you in just a short bit. To this, I would then like to transition to the next aspect that we just spoke about, which is on the capacity building front. For this, I would specifically like to invite Mr. Alauddin Ahmed. Um, Mr. Alauddin Ahmed is an environmental engineer with more than 20 years of experience in the sector. He constantly supports government entities on development projects, research, policy advocacy, and curricular development. For a long period, he's also served with the WHO in managing large-scale projects targeting vulnerable populations in geographically and technically challenged contexts of Bangladesh. Mr. Alauddin has also worked on humanitarian and emergency response. At present, as a project manager with IT and Buet, he's serving the sector with capacity building initiatives. Um, Alauddin Bhai, you worked extensively on capacity building through peer networks. Now, given IT and Buet and your collective expertise, if you could share with us today, what have been some of the most effective strategies in translating shared knowledge into action?
Thank you, Rashwin, and my esteemed panelist as well as a good morning yet in the Indian zone to all the participants of this event. It is my pleasure to speak in front of this august audience and particularly focusing on the capacity building, for which I have a very soft corner for quite a long period of time. As you know, Bangladesh, though it's a sort of a flat country, even then it is quite challenging in different areas geographically as well as in terms of for water sanitation hygiene, socially and through socio-cultural factors as well. The network we are talking about in the country, the ITN Buet, as you can see, it's an international training network. It itself emerged as a part of a global initiative where there were several international training centers like this, and ITN Buet was hosted in Bangladesh University of Engineering and Technology, which is a public university and primarily work to serve the students. But the center first come up with to work on water supply and waste management to serve the sector and the professionals and all the stakeholders, just my previous speaker, Mahareen, mentioned. It sits in a very strategic position where it can play the bridging role between the academia and the sector and other professionals who are primarily working on water supply and sanitation. And at present, as you know, for the SDG drive, sanitation is much more challenging. If we consider safely managed water supply and sanitation, sanitation requires a lot more attention and drive to achieve and serve the entire nation as well as the regional people with good health and the better life. So for that, when we started the journey, the importance of network emerged as a very unique thing for capacity building. As Marin mentioned, capacity building is not only about training, it is also about targeting different groups and different entities and enabling factors. That includes the policymakers, the city leaders, the mayors, councillors, the implementing organization itself who are implementing for these cities, the financial institutions who are supporting with different projects and development initiatives, the city officials and who directly operate or provide different water supply and sanitation services, including FSM services. Then finally come the ground level workers, the sanitation workers, the masons, the private sector itself who do different sanitation businesses, the business entrepreneurs, and of course the future professionals who will be working with these sectors, who will be absorbed by these sectors, like the students and technical institute who are affiliated with those. So all this target group, when you focuses on capacity building for them, the network comes very handy. Like India, there is an FSSM alliance. In Bangladesh, we also have FSM network, particularly work on FSM. And through this peer learning and advocacy, there was a intense requirement in the sector to have a institutional and regulatory framework for fecal sludge management. So apart from these initiatives that led to such policy documents, the network also work on priority issues, emerging issues, and left out issues. And the collective voice makes a real difference in the sector, as well as who will be taking the policy decision. So what happened in Bangladesh, we have a network of networks, because you can see there is a network like FSM network to work on FSM. Similarly, there are MHM platform who are specifically on ministerial hygiene management. There are WASH Alliance who works on different water supply issues. There is other networks like who work on urban agendas and those sort of things. So all this network of networks again comes together, sit together, and the peer learning can be rapidly scaled up and distributed and disseminated among different groups. Similarly, in the region, like we are working with NFSM Alliance, MUAN in Munas in Nepal, and CVSAN in Nepal. There is MAP, and so all those enabling factors and networks give us different capacity building ideas and guides. Like I mentioned, for the different target groups, for some you focus on advocacy material, for some you focus on only meetings or networking events. For some you need classroom trainings, for some you need hands-on training, for some you need just some sort of dialogues and collaborations. So all these ideas and the way and modalities of how network can expand and how network can support in doing the capacity building helps not only the country but also the region, as well as the global South-South collaboration mostly. From the global North collaboration, of course, our knowledge exchange and dissemination also works in there. I would also like to cite one example of what we could formalize, seeing the strength of the horizontal learning that capacitate the cities and city leaders and city officials itself. We call it the mentor city approach, the citywide inclusive sanitation mentor cities. Because there are cities in this region who has strength on some sort of area. Maybe the city is not perfect. It will take time the city to be a model city in all the grounds on aspect. But there are specific things on which a city is a model and can share its success to other cities. So that city can be a mentor city for other cities. The mentee city itself can be a mentor city for other area. So we definitely worked on these cities and work on the mentorship. And one of the criteria of the mentorship was the city itself will have to demonstrate, not an NGO, not ITN BUET, not NIWA or UCLG, anyone else. Rather, city officials will convey, and that horizontal learning and peer-to-peer learning works better because their way of exchanging dialogue and talking is much more comfortable, and they belong to a comfort area because of the peer status of one city to another.
Right.
This time I will end with another example. In Bangladesh, we are now preparing the sector development plan. It's a 15-year long plan for the entire wash sector. And these networks, plays a very strong role where they contribute to such planning because, one is knowledge dissemination that we do through the knowledge repository and documentation, as Mary mentioned. Other is, retaining the knowledge. The public sector, always changing. One people is going from one position to other position, but this network somehow retains them in the loop, closed loop, and the network is and the knowledge is also retained for them and shared. So
Right.
So this session I want to stop here and maybe talk later. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Alauddin Bhai, for sharing those experiences. I think we will come back to some of these questions in a bit, but just to sum up, what you just highlighted is very critical. That knowledge must not just be transferred; it has to be contextualized, it has to be tailored, and it ultimately has to be institutionalized. So to ensure that scale and sustainability, there is a need to institutionalize these efforts, be it creating, updating, disseminating, and also various channels for comprehending knowledge, as you mentioned, how it has to be very contextualized and tailored. With this, you also move to speak about the importance of these city-to-city network platforms. Building on this, I would like to now direct the question to Mr. Shamin, who can speak a little bit more on the impact from city-to-city collaborations. Mr. Shamin Asan Chowdhury is a seasoned expert in local governance and policy advocacy with extensive experience in project cycle management, team leadership, grants, partnerships. Shaman has worked with esteemed organizations in the past, SNV, UNDP, Save the Children, Helvetia Swiss Intercooperation, John Hopkins University, and many more. Shaman ji currently serves as the project manager for MUNAS at UCLG, where he leads efforts to mobilize cities and drive municipal-led investments across the region. Shaman ji, pleasure to have you today. Um, as spoken by Alauddin ji, while building capacity is crucial, the next step is ensuring that this valuable knowledge is institutionalized and shared broadly. And to his point, a successful example is the city to city or the sector to sector learning model, where experiences and lessons are codified and exchanged through such model, and how they become powerful tools for replication and scaling across regions. Shamanji, based on your experience, could you share with us today how these models have enabled the scaling of such best practices? What key conditions are necessary to ensure that shared knowledge translates into a tangible, lasting action across regions and across sectors, keeping it very, um, broad overall? What is the role of the city to city networks?
Uh, Thank you, Rashwinji, for the nice words. I consider myself as a very good student of such platforms where all the panelists are the experts. So I'm jumping directly to actually what UCLG and UCLG ASPAC is doing on the questions you had. UCLG is a network of the local government and the local government associations. And right now connecting more than 7,000 cities and 7 regional sections globally. And UCLG Asia Pacific, we call in brief UCLG ASPAC. In brief, we are covering right now 23 cities and 35 local government associations. And if we look back to the SDG 2023 to achieve, so always we're speaking on no one left behind. So if we say no one left behind, we have to, of course, focus very much on the local government cities or local government units as a node of the main network. And if I go to some of the examples before going to the regional aspects, so in Nepal, the Municipal Association of Nepal, that is called MUAN, they have developed 7 provincial learning centers. They call PMLC in 7 provinces. In Bangladesh, the Municipal Association of Bangladesh, MAB, they have formed the policy advocacy unit. They formed gender equity and social inclusion unit. So all these kinds of examples are composed by the city leaders or city representatives, as well as the associations in different countries like Bangladesh, Nepal, Indonesia, or Sri Lanka. They also offering kind of a performance award for the cities. They also offering kind of competition among the cities. So it's not only the association or it's not only the coordination issue. Within this, it's working kind of capacity building. It's developing their capacity for advocacy, policy review, policy advocacy, and within country or beyond country, they're sharing these learnings with their peers. I mean, cities in the other countries, and how actually UCLG ASPAC supporting these local government association or cities. Right now, we've been working with a number of regional platforms like the Asia Pacific Sustainable Forum for Development, APFSD. And you know that 12th APFSD is going on right now in Bangkok. And there are a number of sessions are led by UCL JASPAC, where most of the speakers or resource person are the city leaders, and they're sharing the experience on different SDG progress. We also working for Asia Pacific Local Government Coordination Body. Also hosting Asia Pacific Mayors Academy Secretariat. We have close contact with Asian Cities Summit. Also, we co-host with AILSG, which is very known in India, and Asia Pacific Urban Forum. We also closely work with this kind of forums. And one of our key role is to assist these forums to develop the declaration papers or call for action papers. So this is the way actually we are trying to make bridge between the cities to other cities, associations to other associations, and networks to networks. So it's kind of a decentralization of social networks, we could say. And within UCLG ASPAC, the UCLG Executive Bureau meeting or UCLG Regional Council or UCLG ASPAC Regional Assembly, these are not only for the purpose of the be together. These are also platforms for sharing the experience from the cities so that other cities could learn and they could replicate the good practices, and as well as they could know the challenges, because for the Asia Pacific, because the climate change issues, because of the geomorphological issues, we have a number of challenges we're facing. So these are the platforms supporting the cities to get good ideas or good or sharing better ideas. And through these networks, we are also assisting for the capacity building at a country level. As Alauddin was saying, the initiatives have been taken in Bangladesh or under the capacity building program in Nepal. The associations also very much engaged with these networks with ITN GUET or CYSAN in Nepal. And they're also working very closely. And very interestingly, just an example, in Bangladesh, the master trainers pool for the sanitation programs coming ahead have been developed by the ITN GUET and WaterAid Bangladesh. Those have been selected from the Municipal Association of Bangladesh, the MAP cities from the different regions. So it helps to sustain by their own instead of depending on other development partners or X, Y, or Z. So that's actually we are focusing very much that how these networks within and beyond country, within a region and beyond region, they could work well as they could sustain within their capacity. So not only UCLG ASPAC is supporting us, regional, globally, many platforms supporting these networks and associations. And that's the way actually we are trying to benefiting the citizens who are actually in need, not for the cities. Finally, the target is for the people who are actually in need, or for whom actually this city or city leaders are working for. So that's very brief from my side. As well as just before closing, I would say this UCLG ASPAC Secretariat is based in Jakarta. However, most of our regional programs are decentralized. We organize in Kathmandu, in Delhi, Jakarta, Dhaka, Colombo. So this is also part of our strategy that locally they become more capacity, more enabled to work on such big networks. So that's very brief from my side. Back to you, Rashwin, and I hope to talk to you more.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Shamim for sharing your experiences. While we've covered so far, the alignment, then we move to capacity building, then to institutionalized learning, and how platforms and models such as city networks. One critical piece that you also mentioned is sustaining these networks in the future. And most times this comes as an afterthought. And now moving on to the next section, I would like to bring in Anushka on how they've leveraged peer networks to ensure that there is sustained networks in the future, right from the fund aspect of it. A little bit on Anushka. So Anushka again began her career with KPMG in the deals advisory team and transitioned to the development sector. During the COVID-19 pandemic, she co-founded Mission Amra, a relief initiative supporting frontline workers, COVID-affected families, daily wage earner, the daily wage earners in West Bengal. At present, she works in the catalytic philanthropy team at Dasra, where she has been creatively navigating the intersection of constraints faced by funders and recipients, on how you can accelerate impact through strategic and data-driven approaches. Anushka, youth-led and community-driven models are vital for dynamic, inclusive, future. Based on your interactions with young leaders through the peer network across the South Asia region, could you share with us today, what are some of the challenges or gaps that emerged that sparked momentum towards collaborative action, and what was that outcome towards?
Thank you, Reshwan, for your question. Firstly, thank you so much for bringing us together to have this really important discussion on peer networks. And I'd also really like to thank all the panelists who've been taking out the time to share their thoughts. It's truly inspiring to be in your presence and to be in a space that is filled with so much dedication and passion. To start off, we all know that South Asia is the home to the world's largest young population. And this is often talked about as demographic dividend that would hone and boast economic potential. But we often forget there's also an opportunity to tackle large, deep-rooted social challenges to build a more inclusive future. Because after all, young people aren't just participants in driving this change, but they will be the ones who will be essentially shaping the future and be the custodians of it. And given this opportunity over the last couple of months, we've undertaken this journey to really understand the investment needs and community practices that can really empower young leaders in India, Nepal, and Bangladesh. So towards this end, we really try to adopt an inclusive participatory approach using peer networks and learnings at the core ethos of guiding our efforts. We included young leaders, youth-led, youth-focused organizations, multilateral agencies, intermediaries, funders, researchers, and other sector practitioners. We've anchored several roundtable conversations and focus group discussions to really create a space for deep learning and deep listening so that various different diverse perspectives can come together to unpack what's going well, what we're missing, and how we can truly build something that is sustainable and impactful and reflective of young people's needs, perspectives, and ambitions. At the core, this process wasn't just about channeling funding, but it was about making sure that young voices are heard, leadership opportunities are enabled, and at the end, young solutions are designed by young people and for young people. Something that we heard through our conversations was that India, Nepal, and Bangladesh share a deep connection, and this just goes beyond their shared history. But we also see similarities in the struggles and aspirations the young people from these three countries have. From gender and caste barriers to economic challenges and broader realities of these three developing nations, young people and organizations from working in this space shared similar roadblocks. For instance, we know that a lot of the three countries are most of the initiatives and efforts are largely geared towards population and broader metrics in empowering young people related to education and employment. But sometimes these initiatives often overlook the softer, more equally important aspects to nurture youth leadership, such as young people's ability to think critically, to negotiate for their rights, to really be able to lead effectively. Because at the end of the day, these skills are really important to transform them into informed change makers. Youth leaders also from the region shared that they often find a lack of safe spaces, mentors, and also that there aren't really hands-on opportunities for them to develop 21st century skills that's needed for their own futures. They even shared a common frustration where their voices are often dismissed and overlooked as inexperienced. And while some of them might be lucky to be a part of the table, their input is often not put into action, or their time and effort often goes unacknowledged. So I think something that we really heard is that youth leadership needs to be inclusive. It needs to take on an approach that acknowledges the diverse and intersecting identities of all the young people. At the same time, systems have also need to be sensitized and need to be educated so that they can hold accountability and show mutual respect for the young people they're working with. At the end of the day, the responsibility is not just about it's not should not only rest with young people alone, but it kind of also has to go beyond being tokenistic and extractive to really provide decision making authority. um, I'll take a time check here just to see if or I can even go on to share some of the wonderful insights we heard from organizations. Reshwan, if you're doing well on time.
Thanks, Anushka. As always, time is of the essence and time is the challenge. But thank you so much for sharing that, Anushka. With that, we will quickly break into, question and answer section, requesting the audience to leave your questions on chat. It would also help if you wanted to be addressed by a certain panelist, and we'll see how best we can do this. We can take 3 questions, please. All right. So while we wait for questions to pop up on chat, there was one question earlier from Prabhavati Naidu, where she was asking for some tested models that are practiced. So opening this up for any of the panelists, if they want to take this question on what are some of those tested models, like for example, the city network is something we spoke about, but if there's another example of a tested model that is currently in practice.
Rishwan, if it's okay, I can take this up. If you're talking about model, I hope she's talking about network in itself, right? Which has worked, right? So in that regard, I can give you a model of a River City Alliance, which National Institute of Urban Affairs is the secretariat of, and it has been owned by the Ministry of Jal Shakti, National Mission for Clean Ganga, which entails initially it entailed the cities across the Ganga belt, but now it's across India. So it's a similar platform like Parvat Manthan. Parvat Manthan is more towards hills, but the River City Alliance talks about the planning and the implementation with regard to the river cities in India. It has been recognized and owned by the government of India. So this is one of the tested models which is been working as a platform in India. If I hope I answered your question on that.
Thanks, Marine. Sorry, for the interest of time, I'll just move on to the next question, and we will come back on that if in case beyond the session as well. A question from Devanshi Sumaya, and this is a bit more on the management of such platforms. So one key question was: are there any standard MOUs, templates, etc., that are used to standardize or enable these collaborations with stakeholders? So requesting a panelist to take up this question, please. Yeah.
Yeah, let me come up with a little bit on these standard MOUs and previous one. In most of the cases, when the network starts, the background of starting the network for a different network is quite different. So it is really difficult to come up with a standard MOU or one, because you need to go to the history and you will figure out some networks happen because of some donor funding. Some network happens because few very enthusiastic, sector leaders wanted to make a change to the sector. And that's why this network happened. And this question is linked with the sustainability as well, as you mentioned about. For example, in Bangladesh, the FSM network started with 5, key partners, and all of 5 partners were chosen so that they have their own organization. From the own organization, it can be continued the support, and the support was not based on a very hard and fast rule of yearly subscription or not like this, rather than voluntary work. So this type of network often functions better and works more. One of the challenges, if your objective is fulfilled, whether the network will continue or not. But we see in this sector, especially WASH and urban development sector, the agenda is sort of sky is the limit, never ending agenda, and once after another pops out. Just I'm concluding with two examples of the strength of this network. It will also contribute to the previous question as well regarding some models. Like I mentioned, the IRF FSM happened because of the FSM network. Two other initiatives I can give. Few NGOs were practicing, a cooperatives model, bringing the sanitation worker to form a cooperative so they can sustain. There was another model to have private sector engagement in the FSM network so that, the transportation emptying services can be run into a business model. But those were happening in silo models. When these cases came to the network itself advocated so that now these workers are in the process of forming a national level, cooperatives or national level worker associations so that they can be recognized by ILO as well. Without the association, the ILO standards not all goes there. Similarly, now the banks are coming with funding for these private sector business entities because of this network intervention. So those are sort of models, and as I tell, the sustainability and the MUs depends on situation and interest. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. Thank
Uh,
you, Alauddin
Rishwan,
ji.
can I just add on to Alauddin Bhai what he mentioned, just an elaboration of that. So, giving you an example of Parvat Manthan, when we conceptualized this whole forum, and because it entailed the cities across the Indian Himalayan range initially, so we started mapping out, because I see a series of questions, so I'm just trying to answer these questions. So we tried to map out who are the potential organizations who are working in these specific geographies, second, in the specific sectors which we want to do, water, sanitation, and climate change. For example, our first partner was Boda South Asia, who said, yes, we welcome this initiative. And then with them, and further, many other organizations came in. We did a consultation meet. We mapped all the essential organizations, grassroots organizations, as well, academic, NGOs, parastatals, all of them we brought together, did a consultation meet. First, to understand the need. Is there a need for such forum to be there? Because it's very important to understand, like, it's not a particular organization, as we are saying that it's a network of different organizations and the stakeholders. So we need to have a common consensus also. Once we got that consensus, then we started to chalk out the whole vision. And the vision is agile. It depends across with regard to the government initiative, but I think it's very crucial to have the trust with regard to the different organizations who are part and parcel of such collaborators. And with them, you can have an MOU, a non-financial. It depends upon the whole funding mechanism, who would be the secretariat, what are the key skill sets which different organizations can take over. Yeah,
Thank you.
just wanted to add that.
Thanks, Marine. Again, the questions are pouring in, but we are very stressed with time. There are a few questions on, the sustainability of these networks. What is the role of the network in sustaining these initiatives? There's also a question on collaboration. In this, how do organizations and peers go from, competitiveness to collaborative? How does that happen? What is that translation around? And also, if there are some, good practices on how you can measure this impact. There was also a question on, how do you engage with youth to get them to speak their minds, and also to how to make an enabling environment such that their voices are heard and action can be taken on emerging innovations coming from them. I'm going to leave these questions open-ended, and I would like each panelist to summarize each of this and the larger session in one sentence or two, maximum 2 sentences. And with that, we can close the session. Thank you so much. Anushka, we can start off with you, please.
Yeah, thank you. And I think that's a great question. I think while working with young people, it's really important to build their capacities and not just put them in decision-making seats without giving them the needed support, guidance, and mentorship. I think my parting thought would be that peer-to-peer learning really works the best when different views can come together, irrespective of age and experience. It's about sharing, questioning, and kind of growing as a group in an equitable and inclusive way.
Rashminji, just a few lines. There is the local government associations in different countries are not based on any issues. Rather, they are based on the greater interest of the municipalities or cities, as well as the associations when they have internal competition, or I would say they have reformation. So the institutional memory still remains, it doesn't lost. So that is the important for sustainability of what they're doing, as well as the sustainability of the organization's mission, vision, and goals. So that finally contribute to the national level or policy level, regional level policy advocacy, which is a good learning for many of us, maybe. Back to you, Prashantji.
Thanks, Shamim bhai. Alauddin ji, if you would like to go ahead next.
Thank you. To conclude in one sentence, really difficult, but let me highlight one thing regarding the youth engagement. Like Bangladesh, we have a house of volunteers through which we get together all these school, college, and university going students, and there are other platforms as well. I am not going to going that line, but there were several question highlighted regarding sustainability and how to strengthen and grow up on this network. I want to thank Dasra in this regard. Such sort of session is required as well. When you polish yourself, you take it some learning and grow up here. And if you do such series of consultation continuously, and if you figure out some group of people are always retaining, you will figure out without even financial and project support, this sort of group is going to serve you for the nation and for the sustainability of the projects. It can be a model. Again, thanks to all for questions.
Thank you. And Mary, in your last sentence, please.
Oh, very difficult to answer your series of questions in one sentence. I agree with you, Alauddin Bhai, on that. But just want to bring the bigger perspective into the foray, that this, as we all are aware of the fact that according to UN SDG, this decade is the decade for making that change. And when we are talking about these platforms, we are talking about having water and sanitation for all, including the marginalized and everybody. So all these platforms are rarely, if you think about them, they are the ones who bring the voices of unheard heard. I'm sure the objective of all these platforms is how the different stakeholders, as rightly mentioned by Anushka, the youth, they are our future. And how can we build on this stakeholder? How can we bring the grassroots NGOs? Because they are the ones who have the maximum knowledge, but they're not able to amplify the work. And forums like these help in amplifying the work of the people who are not able to do that. For example, with regard to Parvat Manthan, we ensured the encouragement of the youth by involving them as interns or showcasing their work. So this is some type of recognition you're giving to the people who are the main, who bear the brunt, and or even the one who are the beneficiaries of such forum. And one thing I just want to mention, that these forums are not only for advocacy, to bring the advocacy level change, but they are also the ones who bring the technological intervention, all those areas which are crucial for ensuring a citywide inclusive sanitation or planning in a city, state, or nation. So all these platforms try to bring out the best which can be done at different levels. Yes. I
Thank
stop
you.
over here.
Thanks, Marine. Thanks everyone once again for joining. I think it's quite clear through this session that peer-to-peer networks are not just tools for knowledge sharing, more like a catalyst for collective transformation, about enabling action, influencing systems, and sustaining impact, and how they pave the way for collaboration over competition, localized, decentralized solutions over top-down or centralized approaches, and long-term systemic changes over short-term fixes. Thank you once again, everyone, for joining this session. Again, in the spirit of peer-to-peer networks, I'm taking the liberty to speak on behalf of the panel, but also because I've worked closely with them. Please feel free to reach out to them on LinkedIn for further questions or further information as required. I'm sure they would be happy to connect with you and support in whatever is required. Thank you once again for participating. We will have a short poll now before we end the session. Thank you and have a great day, and looking forward to seeing you all at the other sessions at DPW.